infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Things in this house have turned particularly intense, and I would say vicious, because the difference between this house and the other two is that I have been physically attacked here. And I can't, other than just regular touching and hair and, whatever, I have in this house, I have been physically assaulted. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. I'm still kind of nervous that it's going to happen again. Just last night, I had it's almost like the pillow was flipped up in my face. We have become so worried about our pets that we no longer sleep in our bedroom. We sleep on the couch. We have a sectional. I sleep on one section, he sleeps on the other. And I'm facing out on the couch. This has happened to me twice now. It's almost like someone takes their hand, slides them underneath the pillow, and flips it up. And immediately I look, is it the dog? Is it my husband? No, the dogs are asleep. They're in the floor. He's asleep. He has his back turned to me. But would you like to hear about the physical part?
Yeah, as much as you'd be willing to share about that.
Okay. There was actually a precursor event that happened prior to this. We've got one little pet left, and I just told my husband one night, I said, I just feel like I need to be there and protect him. And we've had so many of them get sick and die. And we had him to the vet prior, and she said, he doesn't even look his age. He's in excellent shape. And then all of a sudden he develops a heart problem. So particularly one night, I told my husband, I said, I really need to be in there. I just feel like I need to be there. So I was actually on the couch thumbing through my phone, probably Pinterest. My right side is to the hallway. And I see this black, almost like a mist or a mass, coming toward me. I turn, and this is one of the very few times where I've gotten just a dead on right in my face. Can't explain it away with anything. It's extremely dark, it's extremely thick, and it's big. And it is coming right for me. As it comes around the end of the sectional, it almost looks like a snake. It just takes the form in like a smoke form of a snake. And it, at that point, blows up again and just blows me over, basically. I don't even have much time to react. I don't even know what to think. I'm kind of sitting there in disbelief. So much disbelief that it took me a while to even for it to register what was going on. So after this happened, I don't think it might have been a week, a couple days. I had fallen asleep on that part of the couch had been woken up from the sound of my husband with the sectional. Sounded like he was walking behind the sectional, and with this sectional, when you're lying down, you can't necessarily see very far up over it, even if someone's walking past him. Like I said, we're just like little short hobbit people, so I probably wouldn't have seen him that well anyway. So I hear distinct footsteps. I mean, just like boom, 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 boom behind me. So I'm like, I say his name. No answer. And not 3 seconds later, whatever this is on top of me. I don't have time to do anything. Something has its hand around the inside of my left knee, a little way up on my thigh. I mean, all the way around. Had to be big. It felt like it was because it could wrap around that far. Something else, hand had a hold of the top part of my right foot, and it was dragging me off the couch. No mistaking it. That's exactly what it felt like. And I was so terrified. Have you ever been so scared? It's like what a lot of people, I couldn't scream. I could not. I was trying to get it out. I could not. And finally, I kind of squeaked it out and got my husband roused. And by the time he got in there, I was completely hysterical. I was in just complete disbelief. Like I said, I don't think it was sleep paralysis because I was already awake, because I was disturbed by thinking that he was in there and had already walked past me. But that was just, it was surreal. And a lot of people would ask me, could that have been sleep paralysis? Well, I suppose so. I can't prove, how do you prove that? But it felt so real. It was surreal, but just the physical aspect of it felt so real. And I was struggling so hard.
Did it leave any marks on you?
I didn't look. I didn't even think to. I was just so distraught at that point that, after all these years, that nothing like that had ever happened before.
Mm-hmm.
I have found scratches, some pretty, good ones where they've actually bled a little bit. I've had, like I said, the bruising. I have the touching, play with the hair, feel a hand on your shoulder. I have these big these big fluffy sweaters, and it's not uncommon to have them flipped up in the back or that kind of thing. I had never had anything like that happen before. And now it's kind of like it's not to that degree, but it's getting to where it's something physical every day, every night. I had that experience last night with the pillow bit. One night last week, I could have sworn that the dog had jumped up on the end of the couch. You know how if a dog wants up or if they want to sleep with you, they'll jump up, put their paws on you.
Mm-hmm.
I could have sworn that one of our dogs was doing that, looked up, she was in the floor asleep. And my husband wasn't moving. He usually doesn't. I mean, it takes a stick of dynamite to blow him up when he's asleep. But no explanation for that. But it was very much, I just knew that it was her trying to get up on the couch with me. So last night when that happened, and once again, and my husband was awake this time too, it was so obvious. It sounded like a huge heavy man was walking behind us behind the sectional. We have a slab foundation, a concrete foundation. So it actually takes a whole lot to make that kind of sound because we have vinyl floor covering too. But that happened first, and then the pillow flip happened next. So And it does seem to be, for some reason, largely directed at me right now. Don't know why.
First of all, I'm really sorry you're going through all that. I know you said there was some recent physical stuff, but that's pretty horrifying. Do you have any idea of why it is ramping up in such a way and why it would be directed at you in such a way?
You know, when the priest came to our house, I can remember we were all sitting around the table and we were trying to get to the bottom of why is this going on and where is it coming from? And he made the comment, he said, you guys have got it coming from a lot of different ways. Familial, the incident that happened at the college, we kind of came up with a possibility there. I think one of my relatives, which I loved her dearly, but she lived, she really did some very, very strange things that at the time did not make any sense until I began to describe them in front of the young lady who was the former practicing witch. And she just perked up and she said, that's a spell. The things that she collected were for spells. She would collect human hair. She had a whole array of herbs and things like that. But this was a dear woman. I mean, she wasn't doing anything harmful or dark or anything like that.
So that wouldn't be the unsavory things that you mentioned in the very, very beginning?
Oh, no. I did find out that my grandfather, on his deathbed, I was extremely close to him. He confessed on his deathbed that he had actually been involved in a hit and run when he was a younger man. He hit someone and he left them, and they did die. He had to get that off of his chest. And during the Great Depression, I guess this just weighed very heavily on him. A young woman came to his door. He and my grandmother were married at the time. I don't remember how many children they had at that time. She came to the door with a baby, and she could not feed that child. Of course, the Great Depression. And she had actually asked my grandfather and grandmother to take the child because she could not feed it, and my grandfather turned her away. And from what I understand, the baby subsequently died as a result of that. So, yes, we've had some very, very not nice things. We've had some other questionable things. If I bring them up and my relatives should ever hear of it, though, probably is not going to be good for me.
Oh, yeah, we don't need to cover all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's whatever you feel comfortable sharing. That's definitely more than a gist, right? So.
Yeah. It's, we had an incident at the college. Sometimes, people have an impression that Bible college is so totally different from secular, and it's not. We had some very questionable things that had happened at the college that we think may have had something to do with it. Just where we were placed in the apartment, in the dorm, the boys would come and say, this is going on, that's going on, I'll take you to where it's happened, or they could do some pretty wicked things. I mean, shocking things. And some of them really did not like us living in that close proximity and having any authority at all. And they demonstrated that in some very cruel ways. So it's quite possible it may be coming from that direction also. And that's a couple. But I think that Keith thinks that he has said a couple of times that he feels that it's more familial. And one of my immediate family members in particular, I wouldn't doubt it if that's the case. But yeah, it's been a long go. It's been a long trip.
Well, and I wonder how
But
much even just simply your husband, answering the calling. And now he's a minister. He's been a minister for quite a number of years. How much that paints a target on you guys.
Keith has said that at the very beginning. He said when he entered the ministry, you immediately got a target on your back. He said, all of you have a target on your back, and it's so strange, and people are gonna look down on me probably for if you're of the Christian faith, and I want to point out that we've had such difficulty with the Protestant faith, which the Christian churches was our affiliation. But I kicked and screamed from the very beginning. Hey, I don't want to do this. I don't feel like that this is what we were supposed to be doing. Of course, at the time I had two very young children, two small children. It's a very scary thing when you give up. Basically, we did. He had a good job. We had a nice piece of property. We had a house. We basically gave up everything that we had to go into the Bible college. And, we went pretty poor. I was always, how are we going to provide for the kids? What if we go into missionary work? Where are we going to wind up taking these small children? I bucked pretty hard at the beginning. I never really felt like that I would ever fit in because the background that I had as a child, I was very rough around the edges. You're going to meet some of the best people that you'll ever meet in the church. You're also going to meet some of the worst of the worst. I'm probably going to catch a lot of grief for saying that, but I'm just being honest. My husband did leave the ministry. He left a year ago in June, and as a result of some of just the insanity that we had endured at the second house, just the ramifications of that. But it was also the way that at the very end, we began to explain to people. I actually did something, oh my gosh, that was absolutely just, it was heresy. I told my husband, I said, I'm going up before you, his very last service, because I've got some things that I need to say. And so before he went up for the last three, I went up and kind of said, this is what we're dealing with. This is what we've dealt with for years. And you need to understand some of it. Maybe it has something to do with it, maybe not, but you need to hear it. And prior to that, if I'd ever tried to bring it up to anybody, I actually had one woman say, well, I really don't believe in that stuff. And that at that point is when my husband said, they don't even believe what they believe. And it's true. When it's in the Bible, when you have ghosts, when you have demons, when you have blah, 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 well, I really don't believe that stuff. It reminds me of, and my husband started reading these books by, I think it's Dr. Michael Heiser. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Mm-mm.
And he's a biblical language scholar, and he specifically talks about how the church has left pretty much the spiritual part of it. We accept certain parts, Jesus turned water into wine, that sort of thing. But we kind of like shuffle everything else under the. We take bits and pieces. But I'll never forget that the way that I spoke tied into his sermons. The very last ones that he did were related to that. We actually did, at the end of the sermon, when everybody was leaving the church, he had a few people that would come up. They would say, I'm glad that you talked about was, I can't talk about it to anyone else. And they would do it in quiet, basically, and pull him over to the side. And we had a couple of people that told us that, I've seen this stuff all of my life. I've been dealing with this, and I can't tell anyone. So I guess if there was any good to come of it, that was it. And, once again, it's very sad that the very people that you feel like you should be able to depend upon just basically look at you like crazy. And my encouragement would be that if someone is dealing with something, don't put it off. Find someone to help, which is, I feel like, why we're in the particular situation that we're in right now. We're not battling, it seems like, just one or two things. We get rid of them, and, I know you pray a specific way. Once you drive them out, bring the presence of God in. But it's as the priest had told us, they are waiting like wolves. They will slip in if you are not diligent. And then for the psychic medium to have said, it's just gone on for too long unchecked. So, if you don't feel like doing it in public, try to find someone to help before it just gets completely out of hand. So it's a way bigger battle, I feel like, now than it could have. Fortunately, I do feel like that the priest gave us some tools and some knowledge, and I will say that about the Catholic Church is that they are much more receptive to these types of situations. I'm very appreciative of what they did.
Shanna, I almost feel like maybe this thing feels like it's won in some way because of the fact that your husband, he's left the ministry now because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that has anything to do with it ramping up?
I thought when he left it would get better in a sense because, Keith did tell us you're going to have this target on your back. But for some reason, and we've talked about this, and Keith and I have even talked about it, he says that it seems like for some reason it is directed at me. And I think that that's why he believes that it is familial. It is something possibly from my ancestry that has something to do with this. And it could very well be. And it has been suggested to me, and I've so hesitated to even say this, is that I have sensitivities. And I know this has happened right before we moved from the first house. We have an aunt, and I love her dearly, but she talks a lot, and it kind of like what I'm doing now. I'm sorry, but it's just constant. And she was talking one day and just, really fast, and all of a sudden I'm sitting at the table and she leans over and she says, I always knew you had gifts. And I thought, what in the world is she talking about? Does she have a gift out in the car for me or something? I don't even, what
Right.
is she talking about? But I don't know. I mean, I feel really flaky even to say that. It's possible because I have said and done some really odd things, like I could tell you who was on the phone before we picked it up, or just general feelings about things, and they turn out to be true, or meet someone. There was actually the young man at the college that we think may have something to do with this. When we met him, we actually allowed him to stay in our apartment. It was a situation where he didn't have anywhere to go. It was the end of the semester. I felt sorry for him at first before I actually came face to face with him. We let him stay in there because we had to go visit a lady who had just lost her husband. We were trying to spend time with her because she was obviously so distraught. And so we left him in the apartment. But when I was finally in his proximity, I told my husband, I said, don't leave me alone with him. There is something wrong. I don't know if you've ever been around people and you can almost sense, and I don't want to say their soul or whatever, but I told my husband, I said, he's black inside. I said, it's dark. It's like there's nothing there. It's a void. And he scares me. He wouldn't make eye contact, no matter what kindness that you showed to him. He just had a flat affect. Very, I don't know. I told my husband, I said, I only met maybe one other person like this in my entire life. Just don't leave me alone with him. Don't leave me and the kids alone with him. So I don't know whether it's just a very strong spirit of discernment or something else, but yeah, I have done some very weird things and pick up on things. Like I said, the dog corroborates usually what I think that I hear and see. So it's possible. And it's possible. Keith once explained to me, I'd actually asked him at one time, I think he had said, it sounds like you're sensitive. And he said, in some instances, people like that draw things like this to them like a lighthouse. But, I can see other people as having those gifts. Like I said, believe it or not, I'm somewhat skeptical, even to this day, with everything that has happened. And I try to look for another explanation. But is it possible? Yeah, I guess it's possible. I do feel like my daughters have somewhat of a sensitivity, definitely my oldest one, because she always experiences, like I said, we're kind of like the test one another. I'll hear or see something, I won't say anything about it, and then she'll come and tell me, I heard or I saw this. Well, we haven't been talking to each other prior to that, and, we just wind up corroborating. But my husband says that he's learned to listen if I tell him something. If I say, I feel like something's in here, if you need to get out the oil, you need to get out the holy water, he says that he feels like that he needs to listen. Whereas, several years ago, he may not have. But, yeah, I don't know. I do feel like, to a certain extent, and I have, I guess, gotten sick of it here in the last few months, which is why that I wanted to talk about it. Because although my daughter has talked about it, my husband nor I, either one, have ever talked about it really. And I chose you because I have listened to your podcast while I paint. And some people may say, well, why would you want to listen to, but you're always looking for answers. Has someone else dealt with this? Is there someone on your program who has dealt with the same thing? And I don't mean this as flattery, but you just seem to me like a very level-headed, you're not a sensationalist. And, we've always tried to shy away from that. It's not to say that anybody else is, but you just have a very level-headed, sensible way about you. I guess that's why I thought, you know what, I think I can talk to this. So it
Thank you,
needs to come
Shanna.
out. You're welcome. I think I watched one of your documentaries too. I think it was on Discovery Plus or something like that. So, but anyway, it's just like,
bring it. But before you go off of that, since you've listened to the show, was there ever an episode that you felt was similar to you guys' situation?
I have heard several not even relating to that situation, though, I listened to one a couple of days ago with the gentleman, Nick White. Is that right? Cage. That's it.
Uh-huh.
Cage. Was it Cage the Darkness? I'm
Yes.
sorry. I am so forgetful.
No, that's spot on.
And I just, you don't even know people, but you like them automatically. I mean, this isn't flattery, but I just liked you. I know that sounds, it sounds like patronizing, which I'm not
No,
doing. I'm
it
just
it
stating a
doesn't.
fact.
That's very kind of you, and I appreciate
Um,
that very much. And that you chose me, I'm very flattered. I am flattered by that. So thank you.
well, in the situations that we've been in, it's very hard to trust people. You don't know who to trust. That's why people will say, well, why haven't you had an investigation done? Why haven't you had this done? But it's really, really hard to trust people when you're in this situation because it is so stigmatized and scrutinized. And, you just really, we would, I think at one point that Astonishing Legends wanted to have a show, and I'm fine with that because I think very highly of Scott and Forrest. But Scott has, after they had I don't know if anybody listens to the podcast, but Scott had a very, very, very horrible experience at the Sally House. And I think he was somewhat skeptical until he had that experience. And now I think he is somewhat afraid of dealing with ours. And I can't blame him.
Yeah.
I can't, I can't promise people that, unfortunately, I feel bad about, honestly, I feel bad and guilty about talking to you. But, I can't guarantee someone because you never know when and where you could get an attachment. So, I can remember when we lived at the second house, we actually had a guy who did home food delivery. I don't know if it's the same company, maybe that would be in your area, but he would come in. We lived so far out in the country that we kind of relied on it because by the time you drove to the house with groceries, they were melted or whatever. But he would come in, and I'll never forget, he came in once and he was talking to me, and the creepy room was over to the side of him. And he looked at me all of a sudden and he said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Something just said, get out." And so he didn't hang around for very long. He was out after that. I don't hope nothing attached itself to him. But my youngest daughter's boyfriend, she's just been seeing him a couple of months. And when he comes here, I don't think that he had a whole lot of experiences prior to this, but he is telling her that he feels like when he leaves and he goes home, that if there's any, he just feels like, I think maybe he felt like something was there, but now it's just intensified, more experiences and things like that. And, he expressed that, he was afraid that maybe something had attached itself to him here. And, I can't guarantee that. I can't say definitively that it is, but I can't give any guarantees. So,
Considering what happened when your husband attempted this, I don't blame you if you've never done it, but have you personally ever out loud said, why are you doing this? What do you want from us?
oh yes. And that's only recently happened in the last few months. Because it's like after the physical attack, I thought, we've gone for years. We have not challenged. We have not been public. We have not talked in public. We cleansed the house. Something manages always to get back in. And I guess after that, I don't know really what happened. I'm tired of it. And one of the places here, I've caught some audio a couple of times. My middle daughter, the one that seems to be a little bit more fearless than we are, she's had experiences, but she doesn't talk about it much. She brought a camcorder and she has a little digital voice recorder, and she wanted to record in the garage. And so she set it down there one day for about an hour and didn't get anything. And I said, well, talking foolish, I said, if you really want to hear it, let me go down here and see if I can rouse it. So I went down there and, who are you? What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. I think I may have even said the Lord's Prayer. Well, in one part of the audio, which I don't know if transferring something to Google Drive does something as far as the audio quality. I don't know if they compress it or what the problem is. But if I listen to any of this, I usually use WavePad, the free version. And then I will amplify it just a little bit. And if you turn it up in one point, I asked, I feel something touching my legs. It's almost like it's the sensation, something coating your legs and moving up. I can't really describe it, but I make that remark and I say, are you touching me? And you can hear above the noise, come with me. And when I heard that, the times that I have recorded audio, like the first time that I ever did, I did one time at the first house, and I didn't do any more audio recording until this house. Because at the first house, I thought, you know what? I'm either insane or this is really happening. I've got to find out which one. And I'd actually recorded about 8 hours overnight in the first house. And I was sitting listening to it one day. I was doing lesson plans, and I thought, you're just crazy. Well, I get into it a couple of hours, and there's a woman on there. The humming there's no mistaking it. You don't have to amplify it. You don't have to do anything. It's just like they would put their mouths down to the microphone and hum. I sent that recording to Keith, and he listened through it, and he heard things that I hadn't heard. Because to be quite honest with you, I just couldn't sit and listen for 8 hours what was in it. But he said that he distinctly heard cabinets opening and closing, things like that. Here, since all this has become so intense, I've probably recorded 60, 70 hours worth of audio. When I first started recording, and it's funny because my husband and I have talked about this quite a bit. When I first started to record, the first couple of days, the activity was insane. I think I recorded at one time within 16 minutes, there were 30 knocks. I mean, and I thought, this is just stuff that normally goes on that you're just not paying any attention to. You know how you go through the day and you're so used to it, you don't even pay attention to it. And that's what I assumed was happening. But when I stopped recording and we began to notice, you don't hear this stuff at nighttime. We don't hear this at nighttime. If this was the house settling or popping or cracking or anything like that, depending on the temperature change, I would think you would hear it quite a bit. And this is in the summertime. Excuse me. This was back in the summertime. And it just the popping, cracking, knocking in the garage in one particular recording. Our garage is pretty fairly insulated from the house. I had left one of the very first times that I decided to capture the recording was in the garage. And you can hear very clearly something knocking, banging, shuffling, grunting, almost as if to say it sounded like they were mad, pissed off. Yes, the preacher's wife, it's okay. And a couple of times I was recording, and I can remember in one instance that my husband and I were talking, and then we heard something, and we're both like, what was that? Well, when I go back and listen to the recording, it's actually on there. I think there was one instance where I was getting ready to fall asleep or something like that, and I heard a voice or something, and it's on here. So a lot of times I start off with this and think, there's nothing on there, just whatever. And then when I go through and listen, it's just like, I can't believe this. But, someone else may listen to it and they can explain it away, but, there are some things that we have on recording that can't be. And I sent you the picture over email. I've tried to explain that. I don't even know what could create an image like that. I've tried to match it up with things in the house, a doorway, a window, something on the floor, a shelf, and it's the creepiest. That's the creepiest thing I've ever seen, because I don't remember taking it accidentally. So we actually have some video. One of those first nights that we started the video, we have this shadow in our back door. We have it's almost like a full-length glass door, and it has blinds in it, the inside blinds where you can move them up and down. And I don't know why I never noticed it before. I guess it could have been there, but I'd never noticed it before. But there's a shadow on the outside of our door at nighttime if you flip the back light on. It's the craziest looking shadow I've ever seen. It looks like something standing there, a human, a big human, or some sort of a weird something. And I walked in to the living room one night, and I stopped. And I just got this weird, terrible feeling. It just creeped me out so bad. I told my husband, I said, this is probably nothing. But when I see that, when I look at that, I get so creeped out. And we got up, went outside, looked around, all around. Okay, what could be creating this shadow? Where is this coming? Is it the trees? Is it the lamp at the side of the house? We looked for every possible shadow explanation that we could come up with, and we could not come up with one. So one night we put the camcorder up in the living room, left it overnight. I think I had it on like the night vision, I guess it would be. And at almost the very end of one recording, you can see a shadow, and I'm fairly sure it was from the inside. It looks like a mist or a smoke, and it almost looks like an arm-like thing that reaches down in front of that and pulls back up. There's one part of a recording where on the outside of the door, you see these black rods. They almost look like leeches. And I thought, well, maybe that's an insect, because sometimes you can get insects on the effects of these things on film or whatever, but they were black. I can't really compare it to anything to say how big they were. But judging by the way that the direction that an insect would fly, it just didn't add up. It just really, it sounds ridiculous. They look like flying leeches for any better description. So we have caught some, we have some films of the dogs reacting. We had my middle daughter's dog in the first house that we lived in was constantly barking at the fireplace. We had a particular air return in the hallway. She would stand and bark, and then she would jump away from it like she was terrified of it. We had an air return down in our laundry room. She would go down there to that and just very sheepishly or nervously go up to it and back. She would go back. Or if we were down there, she would be behind us. And, finally one day we did capture that on video. And that wouldn't have been such a big deal, except for the neighbors had a little dog that whenever he would give it a bath, it would run from that house down to ours. and stay a few days. And if we decided to give him a bath, he would go home. But he did not like the fireplace. He did not like the air return in the hallway. The specific things that Olive didn't like, neither did Buddy. So after a while, you think, what's going on here? But, I just really feel like sometimes animals are the barometers. While I may not believe what I am hearing or feeling, the dogs or, the cats will corroborate it, which I did forget to tell you about the one thing that happened here in the art room. I'd actually come back here to lie down for a while, and at this point, I don't feel so, I don't know, uncomfortable in here. And as I said, this is kind of like my sanctuary. So I'd come back in here to lie down, and Mickey, the male pit bull, he weighs, I guess, about 70 pounds. So he's not exactly what you would call, I mean, you just wouldn't think that he would be as timid, but a lot of times Mickey is kind of like glued to my hip. So he come in and I was on my left side facing the wall. Mickey had kind of positioned his back up against my back. And we're just laying there, and all of a sudden, I don't know whether you've put anything on like a baking tray and like shuffled it back, like pushed it forward and back, and it slides and then it goes forward again. All of a sudden, that happened. And I'm just laying there trying to rationalize that. Okay, did something fall on the bed? And then I began to realize, for whatever that was, to kind of shuffle or move that mattress in such a way that Mickey and I kind of like, when it went forward, we went back. It's kind of in a way like we slammed into each other. And immediately he sits up and he starts to growl. He's growling at something toward the doorway. So, what did he see? Actually, when my husband came home, I said, lie down there on that bed. I'm going to try something. So he went to lie down on my bed. My youngest daughter was in here, and I think that she got over there where he was, and she took the mattress, and we tried to push it as hard as we could. We couldn't budge it with him in there. So there were some like little shoe boxes that I had some art supplies on the bed, and I knocked them over. That didn't even affect it in any way. So, that was it made me very creeped out, very uneasy. Still can't explain that one. We tried, but it was not a small movement. It moved the whole mattress. I don't know. It just keeps coming, Shannon. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. This is a good natural, I think, thing to go through, because as you're talking, you're remembering other things, and that's why I try to step back if I can and just kind of let you go through that. And by the way, you're doing a great job considering the fact that you've maybe never sat down and told the whole thing, backwards to forwards and trying to remember every piece. And I thank you for doing that.
Well, I felt so bad in telling you. I knew that I was afraid that once I started talking, it would just start rolling out. And that's basically what has happened last week. I've been telling my husband for several months, when I'm lying on the couch, a lot of times I feel it vibrate. Or it feels almost like someone knees the back of the couch. My poor husband, he has to get so tired of this. But we're sitting on the couch watching a movie right next to each other, and all of a sudden, it's like somebody knees the back of the couch right where we're sitting. And I said, did you feel that? And he said, yes, I did. I said, what is it? I don't know. And, you look at the dog. Was the dog moving? No, the dog's not moving. The dog's laying on top of the couch. He's asleep. The other one's on the floor asleep. So it wasn't them. What was it? I mean, it couldn't have moved itself. So, I told him at that point, see, I'm telling you the truth. It really happens. This happens to me a lot. The other thing that concerns me too is that Keith has explained to me before, whenever something like this gets up enough energy to move things like this, they're not good. They have enough energy built up. Usually that's not associated with anything harmless. The other thing that happens a lot in this house, things will be moved. And I'm really weird. It's like I have OCD to a certain extent. I notice when things are out of place. If I have like something on a shelf, or the shelf that the TV's on, if I've got something under it, I notice it. If it's out of place, I notice it. But we had a little birdhouse that my daughter had gotten me, and it was underneath the TV. And I know it specifically the way that I want it to sit. It has to be kind of catty cornered. I don't want it straight ahead. So I was actually in the art room working one night, and my husband was in there by himself. And he didn't tell me this until afterwards, of course. But I walked in the next morning, and the birdhouse had moved. It was no longer catty cornered. It was kind of directed right at my little spot on the couch that I kind of wallow out. It's my place. I told him that birdhouse is moved. And then he says, well, last night he was reading. He said, last night while I was reading, he said, I heard something move. He said, and I scanned this room to see what had moved. He said, I heard it. And that's what? At the second house that we lived in, I had a really big glass vase, very heavy. I had it on top of the pantry, and it's heavy enough that I knew that if it fell off and broke, it would not be good. Very big vase. So I would always push it to the back against the wall and away from the edge. And I can remember working in one of the back bedrooms one day, and I could hear a sound. I can't really distinguish what it is, but it was loud enough that I thought that my husband had gotten up from his nap. So I get up to go in there. He's not in there. I go to the bedroom. He's asleep. Well, a couple days after that, I look back at the pantry, and the glass vase has moved from the back all the way up to the front edge, almost to the point where we're tipped off. And then thinking about the noise that I heard, it made sense at that point. That was the noise that it would have made. Just recently, I have a couple of little salt and pepper shakers that one of my daughters bought for me. They're on the back of the stove. I noticed that one in particular was moved. It would move and be right up against the wall. And while I'm cooking, I'll try to take notice whether any of that moves or not, because I use big pots for soup or whatever. It would, but to see if it would move, it didn't move, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm actually sitting at the table this week, digitizing some stuff, and hear this really weird noise. The house is quiet. My daughter's asleep. I don't have the TV on, but I hear this really weird, funky noise. I can't put a finger on it. Get up, go to the stove, and that thing's sitting right back up against the wall again. We lose things disappear. You look 4 or 5 times in the same place, it's not there. You come back the next day and there it is. So, we've, I think, covered about every possible, even down to the high strangeness stuff that happened at the second house that was outside. I've always been extremely hesitant to even bring that up. because it sounds nutty enough that you deal with what we've dealt with in the paranormal aspect, let alone what you can get into on the outside in the country. But maybe someday. We had some very, very strange things happen out on the property there. My husband, in particular, had a couple of extremely strange things happen to him. And you're thinking at that point, you're really thinking you're insane at that point. I mean, gosh, how did we, we've gone from this to this and all at the same time, and what's going on here? So, it would be a long book. I've heard the term synchronicity and that kind of thing. I just don't know. I don't know.
So you'd kind of rather not cover what had gone on outdoors, kind of not put words to that. And that's totally up to you. I'm not trying to get you to do that.
Well, at the risk of seeming, even more flaky, I'll tell you a little bit about it. And I do have a picture that I can send you of something that I took outside, but actually I have two. One's on a trail cam. Like I said, we live way out in the country, down a road that is actually basically a dead-end road. We're right at the corner of a dead-end road. We're about, like I said, 14 miles from any direction that you can get out. When we first moved into this place, I can remember sitting on the couch and you hear it sounds like little rocks hitting the window. We don't, whatever. I don't know what's going on. So it's the country, who knows? After a while, we began to hear some thuds on the house. I can't remember what we chalked that up to. We had some explanation for it. But we had a situation where before there was a vaccine, my husband got COVID. Basically, I had to take care of everything in the house, take the dog out at nighttime, and, it was creepy out there. I take her out at 3 a.m. I really didn't want to be out there with her. And she didn't want to be out there a lot of times. I'm sorry. And I remember stepping out one night about 3 o'clock in the morning and look over to the right, and our hill kind of slopes down, and then there's a ravine. And at the top of the ravine, there are cedar trees. And I look over, and there's a set of eyes out there. It's so strange because when I look that direction, whatever it is backs up and fades away. And, I might say, well, that might be the horses or the donkeys, but if you shine a flashlight, in which I had a flashlight, in the direction of a horse or a donkey, usually they're going to turn their heads away. But this was a very steady, even, almost a creepy way of sliding back into the dark. Well, I told my husband, I said, I really want to know how big this is because it looked like it was big. So we went back down into the spot where I had seen that, and he measured, and we looked, and it was very tall, the proximity to the cedar and to the top part of the ravine. I can't tell you what it was. I don't know. I saw it one other time at about the same time, but this time it had its head turned, and I could only see one eye. We did have some other things that had happened, but once again, you live out in the country, and country people they have their own way, and you don't ask questions. You don't. One of the things that I thought was really odd, though, is because our neighbors over the hill, very, very, very nice people, very reserved, very conservative Christians, and the mother of the household, just really sweet person. And she just shamed me as far as being a good person. I hate this, but she did, and she a couple of times offhandedly asked me, "Did you hear anything weird last night?" And I'm like, and we had a couple of times. As a matter of fact, my husband heard something so weird last night that, I told her that he ran in the house. But it always struck me as she really wanted to tell me what she heard, or she was fishing to see if I had heard anything, but she was so conservative, she really didn't want to divulge what. So I did get a picture of what looks like a footprint. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is, but we had just planted some new grass next to the house, and the ground really wasn't that soft, because if you look at the picture, my foot isn't even sinking in the ground. This is the shape of a foot. It's big. The heel is sunk in 4 inches because I brought out a ruler and measured it. I guess you would call it the ball of the foot up front, I think was 8 inches across. And then, like, the heel was fairly big. But I'll have to send that to you so you can look at it. We got something on the trail cam that I actually sent to the psychic medium and said, "What is this?" And she said, "I don't know what that is, but it's a good catch." And we actually put the trail cam out because we thought we had prowlers. We were trying to catch a prowler, but just a lot of, doesn't make any sense. What in the world's going on? And we're just not going to tell anybody about this because we're already looking sane enough. We're not going to. But I've often wondered, do people, when they deal with what we've dealt with, does it kind of get into other weirdness sometimes? Or were we just coincidentally? And then it makes me think of like some sort of a law of attraction. I think Keith had explained something to me about that at one time. But I don't know. I don't have any answers. I can't prove it to myself, so I'm definitely not going to try to prove it to anyone else. So, just a lot of who knows.
Well, and even without Keith mentioning the scout situation, he brought up the word elementals, right? Even without that, as you're talking and then mentioning some of these outdoor activities that are going on, to me, it's very reminiscent of 2 episodes. And I think that they're on the main show, and I can send these to you. I would be very interested to have you listen to these if you're comfortable enough. And I actually titled these episodes The Elemental, and it's a 2-part, and it's a woman named Debbie that lives in the UK. And the experiences are so stunningly similar that it may really resonate with you. I remember, little shadow figures and animals in the home, fleeting glimpses of things, and also
that's
activity
strange.
outside. Yes. And
and that's really strange that you should bring that up. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
When the remote viewer talked to me, and this was so weird, she said, now she did mention, she said, there are these little rat things everywhere. She said, that's what they look like. At first I thought, maybe she's talking about the guinea pigs that have passed on. Maybe they're hanging around us, but the longer I think about it, I don't know what it was. Just, you to bring up the animals. And, I wonder about the UK. I've often wondered about, I don't know a lot about elementals. It's a very basic, shallow knowledge at best, but my ancestry, my DNA is 60% Irish. Sometimes I wonder, is there some sort of a connection to that? Or definitely I will listen to them. When I paint during the day, I listen to podcasts a lot, and your show is one that I listen to. And like I said, some people will probably, well, why do you want to listen to that stuff? You're just drawing it on in. But, you always looking or trying to dig for answers or find someone else that's dealing with the same things. I would be happy to listen to it.
Well, and I also wonder how much of this is either one thing mimicking a whole bunch of things, if it's that powerful to do so, or if it's a couple of things that's able to do the very thing that I just mentioned. I don't know. Regardless, it's terrifying, and you just want it to stop, right?
It's funny that you should even mention that or bring it up, because my husband we had this discussion last night. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had just finished with those experiences. I knew something was going on for sure, because Mickey, the biggest pit bull, he never does this. Never. He has been here 2 months now. It's like you say, he's just kind of independent of himself, but he's very aware. And he got on top of me and laid down as I was lying on the couch. He was going to sleep on top of me. And it was just so weird. And, I told my husband, I said, I just felt it. It was so intense. I knew it was here. He was scared. I watched him. He was looking around the end of the couch toward the kitchen very, very sheepishly. He was fixated on the wall behind the couch. Then he would move over to the wall behind my husband. Then he would be looking back to the kitchen. But my husband was asking me questions. He said, do you think, here was my opinion to him, because he did cleanse the house last week. And sometimes if you ask me something and I'm zoning out, I can answer it. If you ask me anything and I'm actively thinking, I can't tell you a thing. But if I'm kind of just not with it, he asked me, he said, do you think this is related to or the same thing as the thing that the first psychic said was in the first house? And I said, I don't get that feeling. I said, I think it's just about as bad. I said, it's either in another form. It could be, and Keith and I have talked about this. They don't necessarily appear in the form that they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I do think that they can change form. I think that just to shake it up a little bit. But I did tell my husband, I said, this one in here that you're dealing with, as far as trying to cleanse the house, I feel like is the worst one. And it's like a cancer. The one thing that he did not do when he cleansed the house, and I asked him afterwards because of where I was still having these experiences, I said, did you go in the attic? And he said, no. And I had told him before, I said, I just get the intense feeling that the worst one is in the attic again. And he's almost like an overseer. He doesn't necessarily, in this, oh gosh, here I'm delving right into fruitcake. But I said, it's almost like a boss. They don't necessarily get their hands dirty. They send everybody else to do the dirty work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like all the workers have been driven away, and now the boss has to come and take care of it. So I had actually put the recorder into the garage last night. And I can't help but wonder if that didn't kind of stir it up a little bit, because I hadn't necessarily experienced anything that intense in the area that we were in, except for the time when I was physically attacked. But he asked me, he said, do you feel that there anything else in here right now? And I said, I don't really feel that, but I feel that This one is like a cancer. Good luck. Basically, I said it's going to have to get a lot more forceful, I think, with this one, and I don't know what that's going to take. But I have a treadmill in the garage that I really need to get on, and I won't go in the garage to get on it. So it's mainly, feels like now, well, I don't know. On all honesty, it's everywhere because Mickey watches everywhere. There are times at nighttime where he goes into the bathroom and he just lays on the floor and watches from there. So that's a good question. I do feel that it's possible that it may be some of the same thing appearing as different things. I think that happened a lot in the first house. And it could very well be what's happening here. There are some really creepy things here, but I don't always get the same feeling of intensity or intent. But then, with this one, it just seems like a consistent, last night was so hard, like I said, that I didn't go to sleep. I could not. I sat up at the table all night long and worked on a shop, but I just didn't feel comfortable to lie down. I had tried to, and Mickey got on top of me and was watching everything. Maybe I wouldn't have felt so much so had I not watched him and the way that he was reacting. And a couple of nights last week, something happened with them, and this never happens, never. But both of them sat up at about 2 o'clock in the morning and they were growling. At one point, one night, they started to bark, and I don't know what they were barking at. They just don't do that. Not at nighttime, anyway. So, I can only go on feelings, and a lot of people don't feel that that's valid. But when the animals react a certain way, and I feel a certain way, maybe I'm a little bit more convinced that, yeah, there's probably something to this. It could very well be that it's some of the same thing appearing differently. But I don't know. We can go a month. We can go a few months and don't really have that much that goes on. And then it's just like all hell breaks loose. And it may be a couple of months or more, but it just goes on. It waxes and it wanes. It goes in cycles. There probably is some connection to, and I do believe there is some connection to the times when I'm trying to collect evidence. And Keith had once told me they don't want to be known. These entities in particular do not want to be exposed. They don't want anyone to have proof that they're there. I've only had 2 experiences for what I could say were probably ghosts or apparitions. And in the Christian church, it's basically ghosts don't exist. Well, I straight up asked the priest, do ghosts exist? And he said, yes, they do. Which I was absolutely shocked. I mean, to hear a clergy say that. But I've only had a couple of experiences with that. One was at the second house. One was at this house when we first moved in. And I felt no fear. I had no fear. I could feel no reaction. But it feels like when these things are around, it's tangible. You can, it impresses upon you. It's just a very, very different thing.
I think it's very commendable that you personally want to document this stuff. I would imagine that I would feel the same way, right? If this was going on in my home, I mean, not only would I get probably pretty angry, which I'm sure you've had those moments, I can only imagine, and you're trying to will it away any way that you can, but there's also this drive to document this. However, and I'm looking at this from people that might be listening to this right now, and they're going, "Oh, you need to document this. This is incredible. We have to prove this," and blah 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 blah. But the thing is, this situation is not really, and I'm just saying from an outside perspective, it's not a need to document it. This is a let's attempt to diminish or eradicate this, because you're talking about you won't even go in your own garage. You won't go to the bathroom alone. You guys are not even sleeping in your own bed at this point, and it's still going on. It's actually getting worse.
Exactly. Which is why, I talked to Keith about it, and while it seems self-serving, I know that it's not, because I know Keith. I know the type of person that he is. We've talked enough. Very gentle, humble man. So much humility. I mean, and he has told me it has done you absolutely no good to this point to remain quiet. And he's right, because we have been very quiet, and it hasn't worked. And I thought at one point, I told Keith, I said, well, maybe if we do talk about it, there will be at least people out there who would pray, send good vibes, positive thoughts, whatever, that would help, because we are making a stand. I have faith in my husband. I know that he loves God. I know that he does. We haven't lost our faith in God. We have just lost our faith in certain people. And I think some people will understand that. Just being quiet and flying under the radar, and staying low has, at first my husband was very reluctant. And I always talk to him, and I told him, I said, well, I'm going to be talking to Shanna McGraw. I wanted to ask you about this first. How do you feel about it? Is it okay? He was fine. He knows that to this point it's done little to no good. It's only gotten worse. I know that he has the faith. His prayers are as effective as anyone else's are. But being quiet has not done much good, and that's what Keith had pointed out. And in no way is Keith Johnson self-serving. I have never seen. As I said, he could have sold us out many times. He could have mentioned us by name and given our address on Coast to Coast, but he did not do that. Just so I trust what he says. I don't. He has no ulterior motives for anything that he would tell me.
Yeah.
As far as documenting evidence, it's just like I said, if I'm documenting evidence, that is more of me trying to get to the bottom of, are you insane? Are we collectively insane? Or is this really going on? When I did the first recording in the first house, I sent it to Keith. Keith listened to it. I was actually in the hospital at the time. I was in there for 2 weeks, and he called me and he said, can you get pictures? And I said, Keith, to be honest with you, I really don't want to see it. I mean, I've heard it. I really don't want to see it. So, but we have gotten to the point now where we do try to document some with the camera. And oddly enough, and once again, this sounds cliche, but this was a brand new camcorder that I started to use in the garage. It was drained in 15 minutes. Drained. Brand new camcorder. I just charged it. It happened to my youngest daughter, and she attempted to get some things. Once again, somebody could say, oh, she's heard this on a... No, it just... Could it be something technical? Yeah, it could be. It could just be a piece of crap. But factually, the battery did drain. But as far as gathering evidence we don't have the energy to try to prove or disprove, or, prove we're insane, or prove we're, whatever. It's just like when the lady approached me on Twitter, I thought, what is, why would anybody ever want to speak up when perfect strangers are approaching you on Twitter trying to pick a fight? Someone that you don't even know. And so eventually I just got tired, and I think I might have even blocked her, but
Good. Because you don't need that, and we've all been there. I've had that same thing, and people are sure brave over the internet, aren't they? Like things that that they would never say to another human being to their face, and yet they will hop on one of these platforms, and all of a sudden, they are the most judgmental and occasionally just flat out cruel person that you can even think to come across that day. No, and I didn't mean to say that you guys shouldn't be documenting. I want to be clear on that, because like I said, I would be doing the same thing, because part of that is, and Keith as well, part of that side of things is simply just trying to figure out what this is, right? If there's some kind of pattern, if there's some kind of thing that we can pin down to go, okay, yes, this is a haunting, or okay, this seems a little bit more demonic. You've got these smells and all these other things going on. And then you have this elemental angle, essentially, right? I think for me, at least, if we're going off of finally we're going to get this out there, we have the whole timeline laid out for everybody. I don't want people contacting me to go out to your house and create a documentary to get clicks on their YouTube. I don't want any part of that. And I know you guys don't either. That's not what this is about, right? What I said earlier about the change in everyday life is a huge deal. And if people could just for a moment put yourself even a quarter of what Shanna just shared and put yourself in that position, how do you think that would make you feel? And the fact that we need to at least diminish some of this activity. And it is worrisome to me, Shanna, a little bit, by the way, that you've already had Keith bring people out. You've already had Forrest and Scott bring people out, right? And it has not, and I'm not trying to say, oh, shame on them, they couldn't figure it out. That's not what I'm saying at all. It worries me, because I do trust these people, because I look up to these people as well. I've even met Forrest myself, that I'm going, we have to come at this from a different angle. And anybody listening, if you think you have a different angle, some people are astute enough, they will listen to this and they'll get an idea of what's going on. I know I have those listeners out there. In fact, I have somebody that I just had on as a guest recently who I know would be able to do that. She's that good. But get in touch with me, because, and I already told you what I am not going to be dealing with as far as this situation goes. If you want to help, if you have some kind of an idea of what to do, because you've already heard Shanna say that they are cleansing. You even said that last night, in the middle of the night, you guys were cleansing?
It was so, the feeling was so intense, and like I said, Mickey, he was absolutely corroborating what I felt, and as far as the pillow thing. And like I said, he never, and he's such a well-behaved sweetheart, never has climbed directly on top of me. And literally, he was on top of me from my stomach to my chest, 70-pound. And I told my husband, I said, I don't know if I'm protecting him, or he thinks that I'm protecting him, or he's protecting me.
Right.
We were up after that happened, and very rarely do I interrupt my husband's sleep, because he needs to sleep. If it's not, and it does, I think it affects him more than what he says it does, because I think he protects me. He does way more than he ever used to. If he hears something, if he sees something, he will tell me. He may not tell me right then. He may wait a day or two, or he may look for an opportunity to tell me, but he will, if most of the time he will. But yes, let's see, I guess it was about 1 o'clock, and I could not sleep. And I was just I hadn't experienced this level of intensity. I just told him, I said, please get up. I said, please bless Charlie. Please bless the dogs. Please do something for me. And I really, really wanted him to go through the whole house again, but I knew he was tired. But, yes. And does it help? Yes, it does. It does. But there's almost somewhat of a denial that goes with it. Like I said, a skepticism and a denial for us anyway. Because when things begin to loosen up as far as intensity, we kind of get a little lackadaisical. It's almost like, yeah, maybe we were crazy. We don't need to do this. I don't think we actively think that. I think we just kind of slip into it. I think what the priest said as far as being diligent and never letting your guard down with situations, I think basically he compared it to like wolves. They're just waiting, and I think that's a biblical comparison. Just waiting to devour. It's like, referring back to what Keith said. My big question was always why? Why? Keith probably got tired of hearing it. Why? And comes back to that target on your back, possibly the ministry. But I was pretty fairly certain that it was going to stop after he left the ministry, because that's a big target. A big target. If it's a target, that's a big target. And I thought, well, if he leaves, it's going to let up. But I think, here we are. We're in a really nice neighborhood. It's a nice house, and it just seems so contradictory psychologically that this would just be getting worse. And I almost come to the point where I'm agoraphobic. It's so strange, because you would think this would be the last place that I would want to be, but I don't want to leave the house. It's just it's warped in so many ways. But
now, do you feel like that's because you feel like you'd run into someone that you'd know and they'd ask how you're doing, and then you'd want to tell them some things, but you'd knowingly and understandably so, then you would be worried about how they would think of you? Or do you feel like it's keeping you in the house because it does have obviously more interest in you than anybody else, like a form of oppression, essentially, in keeping you in the house?
Oppression. I have heard Keith say that many times. Oppressiveness. The different stages of. I think that's possible. I also think that part of it is being ostracized to a degree by the church. I think that when we left, we just kind of withdrew into ourselves. And, once again, there are some wonderful people in the church, very understanding, very open-minded, very good-hearted. We actually had one lady in the church. She was a neighbor, just a wonderful spiritual woman. If it was on her heart, she would say it. And she once told us, she came to visit one evening, and she said, when I drive past your house, she said, I feel sometimes like I have to pray. Like there's something going on. I have to pray. You have people like that, and then you have the people that say, well, I just don't believe in that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we had to deal with more people like that than not. I think that may be part of it. it's almost like we've doubled down on hiding in a way, but now I'm trying to get out of it. I guess realizing what's going on. The isolation, the alienation, being cornered like an animal, not reaching out to people who would listen or take it seriously. But you feel almost, well, I guess I could say shamed. Shamed, like you've done something wrong. I think maybe that may be part of it. I blame ourselves, I blame us sometimes because we we haven't been as diligent as we should have been. But I think, like I said, sometimes there's a degree of living in denial. Okay, I can't prove it. Can't prove it to myself. Can't prove it to anybody else. Am I crazy? I'm just going to deny all of it. But you go through the day, it's a constant tug of war. Am I crazy? Is this really happening? Am I crazy? Is this really happening? And then I think it's almost we can't be that special. You know what I mean? We can't be that special. But I don't know. I don't know.
Well, after you guys cleanse, does it depend on the level of cleansing that you do, how tired you are when you do it? Does it go away for any certain period of time? And I know you said it comes in cycles, but did those cycles follow at all big incidents where then there's a cleansing?
There will be some peace, yes. And that's what the odd thing is that here it seems like the intervals for peace aren't as long. Like last night was so intense after he had cleansed. And usually the peace lasts a little longer and you don't necessarily feel anything that evil. But last night was an exception. And that's why we had the conversation when we got up this morning. We just cleansed. Why does it feel so nasty right now? Why was that so intense? And I think, that's my question. Why now? Why this intense? What's the circumstance? What caused it? What can we do to avoid it? What can we do to fix it? You feel like you have a certain degree of control, and then he cleanses, and then this happens. And it's like, well, we did such a thorough cleansing this time, except for the attic. And why was it like it was last night? So
that's the first time after a cleansing that it's felt that heavy.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I know you're not going in the attic. I hope that you don't, because this thing seems to be very focused on you. But maybe would your husband be willing to go up there and do some kind of a cleansing?
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I will probably ask him to. I told him a couple nights ago, I said, we really, really, and we really need to go to the Catholic Church and get some holy water. We need to do that. We need to do that too. And two, sometimes I think that whatever this is creates so much distracting turmoil in your life, and it can. That's not to say that everything that has happened in our life is related to this, and I don't think that there are devils under every rock, as they say. But sometimes I do feel like just the ridiculous, one thing after another, after another, after another. We just replaced the battery in one car. Now my car battery's dead. And while that may not seem such a big deal, but when you have it just one thing after another, okay, here's this.
And the garage is one place that you feel like you shouldn't be going into.
Right. Well, we don't have a car in there right now, but, we've had things like this happen before. Appliances tear up. It's, I don't know. I'll ask Keith some of the strangest stuff. And the poor man, like I said, he is so patient. But, I asked him one time, I said, Keith, do these things like draw energy from appliances, or what is going on here? What? Because we did have so many things break. And I know that in one recording that I got, and I started to notice this before I ever did the recording. I said, this refrigerator that we have, it's a nice refrigerator. It's fairly new. It came with the home, 5 years old, and it would make this weird clicking, click, click. I mean, just louder and louder, and it actually woke me up one night. And I told my husband, I said, there's something wrong with the refrigerator. The ice maker's going out. What if it's the, I guess, compressor or whatever it is in it? Something's wrong with it. And I said, well, maybe it's the timer. Maybe it's a defrost. But then I told him, I said, I would think that some of these appliances are on timers that are pretty much set. It wouldn't be a random. But in the first two recordings that I got, it's constant all night long, and it's loud, and the knocking, banging, and it's all the knocking and banging is not coming from the appliances. It's in the walls or around. And I just thought, well, it's got something to do with the refrigerator. It's just going to go out at any time. Well, we got to talking one day, and we realized it's not doing it. It hasn't done it since I've had the recorder in there. So I don't know. Coincidence? Yes, perhaps, but maybe someone else has some insight into this as well. I don't know how the energies work. I've heard thing about how they draw energy from things like that. I don't know how much credence there is to it. Like I said, how you prove it or disprove it. Just all more questions than answers at this point. And, maybe somebody out there will have some answers.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping for. And they've already heard my soapbox spiel earlier, but if anybody out there wants to get in contact and you have the right intentions for it, then Shannon at intothefrayradio.com. Well, Shanna, before we hop off the recording, I wanted to talk to you off the recording for a little bit, but was there anything else that you wanted to add in closing?
Basically when I contacted you, it's just the lesson, and I had already said it. If you begin to have these things, find someone that you can trust, regardless of what people think. If you have to do it clandestinely, that's fine. Just take action early on. We hid because of fear of being stigmatized, being professionals in the ministry, whatever. But in effect, all that's happened is that we've become more alienated and isolated. So, if you begin to have these things happen, take some action. Just whatever your belief system may be, just do something. And my husband has remarked in the past that, because I've straight up asked him, why aren't you doing something? Because even the kids would say, and he has often said that he just doesn't feel like he's strong enough. And, there's an element of fear, I think, of, and almost a worry of what people will think, feeling ridiculous, feeling stupid. And sad to say, I mean, we were in the perfect community to be made feel that way. But if you're in that situation, look up somebody who will help.
Well, and it's obvious that you guys are open to pretty much trying anything. Like you said, you weren't going to scoff at someone that had any dabblings into witchcraft, anything like that. I mean, obviously, you're not trying to have somebody who sacrifices animals or anything of that nature.
Oh.
But as far as you may be of a certain faith, but you are open to pretty much trying anything at this point, right? You guys are very open-minded.
Well, I think that we gleaned some very good information. I most certainly would not have contacted, the community that we were in. Like I said, I do think there are people who can offer different insights and help. That was part of our problem at the beginning. We said, we just been conditioned to know this is the avenue that you go. This is the only right way to do it. Well, when you're in the midst of this, sometimes that's hard to accept, especially when the avenue that you are supposed to be going down is blocked.
Right.
And you're not getting any help. Nobody believes you. This stuff doesn't exist. I don't believe in that stuff. But yet you're the one that has to cope with it. And, that's why, Jim was still in the ministry when the lady did the remote viewing. But I just said, you know what? We're doing it. We're doing it because maybe she can give us, and she did. She gave us some insight. She even brought up, I think, the Native Americans on that piece of property that we were on in the second house. I think she said something to the effect where they were not happy with us being there. And, I did even a little bit of historical research as far as battles that may have taken place there. You look into things like limestone and the proximity to water. We were basically, our property situated in almost like a horseshoe of a river. We were almost like nestled in it. So it feels better, I think, and which is why that I do, and I don't dig as much as I used to in certain specific things, but to know your enemy. And I think that, you really can't fight them until you know what you're fighting. Or I think in a way that has improved just the strategy, which, biblically, but, it's that you got to know what you're up against type of thing. So if somebody can give me that information, I'm happy to take it. And I guess there's always that fear of, am I going to find out that I really am insane? Is my husband insane? Are my children insane? Are the dogs insane? Are the cats insane? Is it just mass hysteria, or are we collectively just crazy? But, I don't know. You just have to be there. It's prior to any of this ever happening. Like I said, I guess I was just as maybe some of the mindset that some of the people now that we maybe ask for, but until you're in the situation, it's hard for anybody to understand.
I mean, I think at this point, Shanna, you do realize that it's not mass hysteria with an entire family and their pets, right? I hope you guys do know that. I'm sure that I would have questioned my sanity a couple of times, but after this long and this, I mean, nonstop pretty much activity in these, quote unquote cycles, that's pretty much nonstop, if you ask me. You might have little breaks here and there, but it's obviously always there and always watching. And it's not you guys as far as being crazy.
I felt very comfortable with the priest, and that was really nice. And I just straight up asked him, are we crazy? Are we insane? And he said, well, you've had yourself screened. We do. All of us have PTSD. I mean, that's a fact. But he said, if you've kind of squared that away, what do you have left? What's left? And basically was to say, it seems like this really is going on. So, and he did experience it himself with the smells from the particular rooms and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Okay. So everybody, Shannon at IntoTheFrayRadio.com. If for some reason you don't like the email, you can try to get a hold of me on some of the socials. Some of those messenger services I'm not as active on as I am would, with as far as email goes. That would be the better way to get a hold of me, at least for me to see it. And yeah, Shanna, just thank you for being willing to share all of this with us. I can't imagine that it's very easy to sit down and finally tell it front to back without, having breaks in between, as far as, that you're actual living your life. And then you're like, oh, well, let me call Keith because here's the next thing that happened. Right. So thank you for being willing to do that.
Well, and it's odd too, and I will shut up now. But basically, when I contacted you, I basically said, God, if you really want me to talk about this, then she will reply. And if she doesn't, you just need to leave it alone. Leave it as it is. And it was so strange because you did. And quickly. And I thought, well, it must be intended for it to be this way. So.
Well, and thank you for trusting me to do that with.
You're very welcome, and thank you.